Welcome to the Dan Bradbury podcast. I'm alone in the studio today, but that's only because Dan had an opportunity a while back to go down to the Progressive Property Network's studios and interview the host of the podcast, Mark My Words, Mark Homer, one of the most successful property investor trainers out there in the world today, has a massive following of people that learn how to invest with him. But what his strength is and why Dan absolutely loves this guy, this is all about the numbers. And you know, if you've been listening to Dan's podcast for long, he is as well. So this is going to be one of those special episodes where we do not have news of the week or fail of the week or book of the week or quote of the week. We're simply focusing on the hero of the week, which this week is none other than Mark Homer. Dan, take it away.
Mark, welcome. Thank you. I say welcome. I'm in your studio, so I guess you should be welcoming me, but you're on my podcast. So nice to see you again.
Good to see you too, Dan.
So I just did an interview with your business partner, Rob Moore, and I like Rob, but talking to Rob is a little bit like having a conversation with a squirrel on crack. It can be quite intense, quite fast paced. And what I love, I don't think I've ever mentioned this to our viewers, is I've actually a subscriber, a happy subscriber to the Mark My Words podcast, which is well worth people checking out, because I really love, those that know me know that I do love getting into the granular detail about the money side of things, about the taxes, about the specifics, about the economy. So I'm hoping we can have some conversation about that as it relates to business owners.
Great, far away.
So first one, connecting up to Rob, is the reason why we're in the studio today is because I was a member of mine sent a message in, oh my God, have you seen this? And it was a video of Rob having a rather heated negotiation with another individual, which led to them in having a £100,000 bet on a charity boxing match. And my first thought when I heard that was like, good God, like, what does Mark think? Because if that was my business partner, did you get consulted in advance, or did Rob just decide that on the spur of the moment? How did that situation pan out?
Well, I certainly knew about it in advance. It was discussed with myself and our managing director. And in terms of, I don't know, having an event for everybody to go along to, I think we were definitely consulted. Yeah.
Okay, well, that's fair. But I suppose, how do you decide then? Because I suppose whenever somebody says an amount of money, to some people, £100,000 is an outrageously large amount of money, and to other people with a larger pot, less so.
Yeah.
The bigger question is there'll be a lot of people listening to this. Well, the people listening to this are business owners. Many will have business partners.
Yeah.
How do you make decisions as it relates to, do you have spending thresholds? Is it explicit? Is it, if one of us is spending over X, we should have a conversation and bring it up in a weekly meeting? How do you manage that dialogue?
Well, Rob is in charge of the marketing within this business, and marketing spend and return on investment, and of course half of any money that's spent, and soon to be a little bit less than half probably, is his, because it's also his business. So I trust him to spend money on things in the business that are going to generate a return. So no, there's no preset spending limit, or you're only going to be able to do this because we've determined at some board meeting that that is the preset limit. But yeah, we sat in a meeting. I think originally it was 50 grand each way, and then Rob increased it. But yeah, that's a business partnership, isn't it? If there's too many decisions that aren't great, or the P&L isn't good over the medium to long term, then things start to change, don't they? But I think that's ultimately sort of where with him and I, he has his areas, and sort of marketing in the training business if he wants to do something. or he wants to change something, I'll give my opinion. We sit there, we'll have a discussion about it. But if he really wants to do it, usually I just sit there and say, fine. And if it's anything to do with a building or our investment portfolio or probably our letting agency or other areas of the business that I would deal with, we'll have a discussion. He'll give all his ideas, and if I really want to do something and he doesn't, he'll usually just go, fine. So that's sort of how it works.
Right, and I guess it goes both ways, as in sometimes you'll make plays or decisions that don't pan out, and sometimes they do pan out. And I suppose this one will be decided on June or July or whatever the date the fight is. Then we'll see what the return on investment. Even though I get that it's all for charitable causes.
Yeah.
So you just got a little slip there that I wasn't aware of, and I presume you're okay with it on camera. So you just said soon to be a little bit less than 50%.
Yeah, I mentioned that because we're trying to set an EMI scheme up to incentivize the most of the staff in the business to get them to stay and make it a better business, more successful, more profitable. So yeah, obviously that means Rob and I putting some of our shares into that pot.
Yeah, well, great jumping off point. Let's talk about taxes. Let's talk about incentives.
Yeah.
I mean, right now, as we're filming this, the UK is in, some would describe it, a bit of a perilous or difficult position economically, especially from a small business owner's point of view. Would you agree with that statement, or?
I don't know. I mean, that's quite a generic statement, and I think the media loves to get onto a bandwagon and then keep sort of bashing it. So maybe if you could talk in specifics.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's do obviously the most recent budget. Corporation tax has gone from 19% to 25%.
Yeah.
So someone would say, "Oh, that's radical. That's a increase of 30 whatever percent." Others would say, relative to where it was several decades ago, it's relatively low. What's your and so therefore the overall tax burden on the taxpayer, but specifically small business owners with the reduction in dividend allowance, etc. I mean, that's marginal, but you get the overall tax burden. It costs us a lot more for somebody listening to this to get money out of their limited company now than it did in the recent past.
Yeah, I think that's really bad for encouraging foreign direct investment, really bad for new business startups. It encourages a brain drain. So, people want to leave, and go and set up elsewhere where taxation is much lower and the business environment is much more friendly. I think it's really bad. Fine, you can look back a number of decades and say corporation tax was in the 30s or maybe even higher. And you look at the OECD and there are lots of other members which have higher tax rates. But it doesn't make us more competitive, any of this. And I'd love to see in 3 years' time, say, how much extra or less corporation tax they actually generate from these sorts of moves. Same thing with tax on dividends. The sort of tax-free allowance has almost gone. Plus, the national insurance rates and tax on dividends has been going up, which same thing, all the same stuff. It doesn't encourage people to set businesses up. It encourages them to leave, and doesn't encourage big foreign multinationals to invest here. In fact, they're going elsewhere.
Well, that's definitely true. But what policy changes would you like to see, I suppose? I mean, because, again, in the political backdrop, there's a pretty strong argument, given the recent elections, to say, you know what, it looks like the next general election, the Tories will be out.
Yeah.
Labour may or may not be in. You might agree or disagree with that statement. And therefore, one might conclude, or the straight line of thinking, people go, Labour get in, taxes going up.
Yeah.
What's your, do you see?
Well, that's not always necessarily the case. And I used to believe that just because they're sort of left-leaning, I think with Corbyn it would have been. But I think with the likes of Starmer, he's played his cards quite close to his chest. I don't think he's really a conviction politician. He's probably a little bit more like modern politicians, maybe, I don't know, maybe Tony Blair, where, you know, you'll see what he's really about when and if he becomes Prime Minister. So he's flip-flopped around quite a lot. You know, the house building targets he now says he's going to reintroduce. He's been cozying up to various elements of business. His Chancellor or Shadow Chancellor doesn't look completely inept. I think she's an economist, which is perhaps more than Jeremy Hunt. So whilst I wouldn't vote for them, it might not mean higher taxes. Clearly, the politics of envy, you know, they've been sort of spouting about putting VAT on school fees or private school fees, and some other stuff in terms of renters, but it doesn't necessarily mean higher corporation tax, higher income tax. In fact, Tony Blair was probably the opposite. What you often find if you talk to a lot of sort of older business people, farmers especially, they say that they often do better under Labour than they do under Conservatives, because often, it's not always the case, but there have been successive Labour governments that have a certain level of ineptitude, and whilst they may, I don't know, set headline tax rates higher, or, you know, maybe remove reliefs and things like that, more loopholes tend to appear and little sort of cracks as they introduce stuff, because I don't know, maybe they're just not as good at setting policy. I think the Conservatives are generally better at raising taxation, you know, in terms of the overall amount that comes in.
So what policy changes would you like to see? As in, if you were in power, like, how would you change things to drive growth?
So I mean, corporation tax, clearly just leave it at 19%. I think bigger businesses, it's higher, or medium and large size. Corporates are higher, I think, but certainly small business, leave it at 19. I think the analysis said that it was going to raise something like 4 or 5 billion extra anyway, which is, even if it does do that, and there's a good chance it won't, it's not very much in comparison to the reduction in people that those businesses are going to employ, or the other taxes they pay, or the business rates and everything else. So I think that's an easy one. I think clearly tax on dividends, same thing, just flows from that, needs to reduce. I mean, how is it right that if you make £1 in your business, you're probably losing 60-something percent.
That's 63p.
Rate. Yeah, to get that money into your pocket, which is just bizarre. It's quite a bit higher than income tax on, you know, money earned, you know, through a salary, or you know, if you've got a partnership, or through a sole trader type operation. So it's bizarre. It shouldn't be any higher, surely, than those other methods of sort of profit extraction. So I mean, that's the first thing. It's huge disincentive. Why do you want all the stress and all the bother of setting up growing businesses if that's what they're going to do? And it has made me sort of think twice about growing businesses here. And, you know, this is not for sure, but the thing that sort of pacifies me a little bit is in my sort of mid-50s, I'll probably clear off for a bit. And I will probably release some pregnant gains, which I've sort of built up over the years, and, you know, by becoming non-resident for a number of years, and I may never come back. So, you know, that may or may not happen, but, you know, in my mind, that's where I am.
For what it's worth, I'd never even thought about that. And somebody who remained nameless, that is our age, so I believe in his 40s, did that, and went left the UK, and I'd never even thought about the idea, because children, family, etc. And when I looked at because he broke down the savings, so he went to a well-known tax haven.
Yeah.
And the saving.
Yeah.
So he's got a multi-seven-figure revenue business with kind of a high six, low seven-figure margins.
Yeah.
And ignoring the assets and how they were moved around, the saving is multi six figures a year. Net in his pocket.
It's eye-watering.
Yeah. And because I went, why are you doing that? Because he actually wanted to go to this particular location anyway, and said, no, I just decided to live there, even though I personally wouldn't. He was like, no, wanted to come here, wanted to bring my children here, that's fine.
Yeah.
And now he's never coming back.
No.
And when I looked at it, I went, holy crap. And he went, I can literally do the most lavish things with just the tax saving. He goes, if my children want to be here, they've still got a home here. Obviously, there's the rules about in and out. Yeah. But it's...
Well, this is the thing. And, you know, and I'm not saying I'm definitely doing this anytime soon, but, you know, because I've got a 4-year-old son, you know, and maybe we have another. So I've got a number of years whilst they're going to be at school and things like that. But, you know, our property portfolios, various other things, I could quite easily come back for a few days every month and, you know, run things and then clear off again. So it doesn't encourage me to be here at all. And I think, you know, if I'm thinking that way, a lot of other people must be as well. I think Liz Truss had the right idea. I think the execution was wrong. And I think she tried to pile a lot of this stuff in too quickly. She didn't explain it properly. And I think the Chancellor wasn't really up to the job. But if, you know, if you look at quite a few of the things that she suggested, like rolling back the corporation tax, you know, there was stuff around IR35, which was great, which means that, you know, you can sort of take on contractors and they can invoice you, like, you know, sort of used to happen without all these sort of worry of these rules. There was clearly a roadmap there to take things back to a more Thatcherite style of sort of taxation and general sort of fiscal policy.
Well, so taking down one level into so the people, business owners listening to this, and then I want to move sideways into property briefly. But business owner listening to this, so when we say loopholes or we just say tax breaks or incentives, what are the most common, or what are perhaps some incentives that you've used or seen be used that perhaps people listening to this aren't aware of, or should at least be having a conversation with their accountant about? They should be going saying, "Look, look at this."
Well, it depends what you're doing, but you know, research and development can be good if you've got a business type which facilitates that. They're clearly trying to reduce those claims. I mean, there's going to be stuff going through, but you know, they've worked for a number of years. They can be quite good. Capital allowances are very good on buildings. I really like buying commercial buildings, claiming a lot of capital allowances on the sort of communal areas in between the flats. That can be very good. I like lots of other sort of, you know, if you take land remediation relief, that can be quite good. If you're buying a building and you're stripping out asbestos, stripping out sort of harmful materials in a building, they're all reliefs which I would use, which are quite useful. Yes, there's, you know, every year you need to make sure you use your ISA and, you know, your 40 grand pension allowance and all those things I make sure that we do. But, you know, slowly and quite intentionally, the Conservatives have just chipped away at every little thing which you might be doing that you're able to sort of, I don't know, relieve or, you know, sort of reduce your liability, taxation liability through. You know, and it's just got us to this situation now where, I don't know, there's not a lot left, is there?
Well, I don't know, how bad could it get, I suppose, is the question. But I suppose the game's got to be, to my mind, if leaving the country's out of the question, it may not be for some people, and that's a whole other topic, but if they're staying in this country, it's like, okay, you've got to play with the hand that you're dealt, even if it's bad. So how do you stay abreast of this stuff? Like, what would, because you've probably mentioned a variety of reliefs there, some of which I'm sure some people listening to go, I don't even know what land remediation relief is, or what business asset disposal relief is, or whatever. How do you stay on top of this stuff? I mean, again, I would recommend people listen to the Mark My Words podcast. You have some great stuff on there where you're talking about some of these things at times. But How do you stay up to speed? Because the rules are always changing, right?
Yeah, well, you need a really good accountant who knows all this stuff. I would
Sign
talk
up,
to.
we've got the same account.
Yeah.
Actually, I'm interviewing him.
Yeah.
In 2 weeks' time.
Yeah. So the would you need a really good accountant. You need to be generally networking with other business owners who understand this stuff. A few of those reliefs I've introduced to our accountant by talking to other property investors, other accountants, and I'll use a couple of capital allowance specialists who will who know quite a lot about those reliefs, and so yeah, that and then I've been doing this, I don't know, nearly 17 years or something. So of course along the way I tend to put all this stuff in my toolbox as I meet more people.
Yeah, I love that, and it's value getting around good people, whether it be accountants or again just networking well. But for me, not with our shared accountant, but the accountant I had before that.
Yeah.
I remember I was at a mastermind meeting. I think you might have been there actually, when it was a mastermind of training business owners, and somebody went, "Oh, I've just rocked in a stonking R&D tax credits claim." Yeah. And the room looked at them and said, "You can't do that in this kind of business." He says, "We can," and we did. And I went and had a chat and got into the nuances. And I didn't end up using who he recommended, but he told me how he did it and what he did. And I went, that does apply. Yeah. I took that back to my accountant, made the case, and they went, we never thought about it. So I suppose the point is, don't assume that your accountant's good or going to give it to you.
You need to go out and harvest this stuff and then take it to them often. Yeah.
So let's talk about property. So these people listening to this that have, some businesses have struggled through the pandemic. Some businesses are still on a mountain of cash and made massive, massive wins and still sat on large cash reserves. And they go, okay, how do I deploy this capital outside of my core day-to-day operation? Yeah. And it tends to be common questions that get asked of me are simplistically stock market, property. Yeah. What's your views on how do people decide how they do their asset allocation?
Well, I mean, how to do your asset, what percentage of your assets go into each asset type. I mean, there'll be calculators online that enable you to get the right percentage between, different types of equities, different type, some bonds and then different types of property, so I'll sort of leave that to them because I'm not the best person to speak to about asset allocation because I'm so overweight in property, but I tend to put money in the area that I can control and I know the most about. So for me, that's the right allocation. But what I tend to do is make money within our businesses, and then some money might sort of flow to my family sort of limited company, which has got that would take cash into it that we're making in this business. And some of the other businesses, and then often from there I would buy tracker funds or ETFs, and most of it would just be Vanguard, Global Strategy, 100 or 80 or 60. I just think that's probably the easiest and the best place. I mean, you can set up a Hargreaves Lansdown account or a Vanguard account, and in Hargreaves you can easily buy those Vanguard funds or some Legal in General iShare sort of trackers. But if you want to make it easy, just set a Vanguard account up.
Oh, that perfect. I just want to say for the camera that we didn't pre-consult on this because that's almost verbatim what I would say with regards to the low-cost index trackers and Vanguard, etc. So let's talk about property then. Yeah. So there's always this debate. A very prolific resi investor said to me about 5 years ago, he said to me, residential's dead. Can't make any money in residential anymore. And he said that because he'd switched everything to commercial, and he felt that the commercial, his gains and the tax breaks and the legislation around commercial was far more reward. The risk to reward ratio he felt was on point. Is that your experience? What's your perception?
No. I mean, those sort of blanket statements are usually disproved quite quickly, and I know that they're sort of inherently nonsensical because, in any market, there are so many different types of, investment, so many different locations, so many different things you can do, that invariably certain things will work and some won't work. The other thing is, stuff gets oversold, doesn't it? Lots of other people were thinking that way 5, 6, 7 years ago. And whilst the capital values with residential probably still a little bit high in my view, what's happened is lots of landlords have exited because they've got pissed off with higher taxation, which has happened because of inability to offset all the mortgage interest if you own the properties personally, lots of extra regulation, red tape, all this sort of stuff. But I suppose that, in conjunction with a few other things, has meant that rents have gone absolutely nuts. So, little 3 beds that we were getting $550 for 5 years ago, we're now getting $900 for, something like that. We did a good sized building, probably bought it in, 17, something like that. Got planning consent on it for, there's 159 tenants above, and 2 commercial units on the ground floor. And we bought that site for 4 million. I sold 4.2. I sold a good chunk of the ground floor off, got 3.6 back, developed the whole thing. Let's say the development above was about 9.5 million, something like that. And I had that building valued the month before last, for 21.46 million, and it now generates 1.5 million pounds in rent, and that is predominantly residential. You can see the uplift. I don't know, maybe we're all in for about 13, 14 million, something like that, and so it was only finished 18 months ago, and it's worth 21.5 million now, and net after all the costs, it's making 600 to 700 grand a year. So if residential is shite, then how have we just done that? Do you see what I mean? And we'd have about 40 million pounds worth of residential and commercial assets, but the majority would be residential, and we make them work. Of course, the HMOs have not been as good over the last since the gas and electric's gone up, and obviously mortgage interest has gone up quite a lot since you had that conversation. So some buildings have become more challenging, but I think the gas and the electric, there's ways around it. We're just having a load of heating controls installed, so that probably reduces it by a third, the energy bills. And interest rates are probably going to go up to 5%. I suspect over the medium term they'll start coming down again.
So how do you assess? So if somebody's watching this market, and let's say they are they've got funds to invest, they're a business owner, they've got surplus capital that they're looking to invest into property, and they are more educated than the average person on the street. Maybe they've got 1 or 2 buy-to-lets, but they're not a buy-to-let landlord. They're not experienced. How would you suggest they educate themselves, or what make decisions? Because I totally appreciate your answer, as in, I think often people want the easy route. You just say, commercial's the route, or rent to rent, or whatever they say.
There's a load of shit commercial buildings, there's a load of shit residential buildings, and there's a load of great commercial buildings, and a load of great residential. Depends what you're doing, doesn't it?
So how
what
might
price
somebody,
you're paying?
What advice would you give for somebody to educate themselves so that they can make better decisions about, okay, how do I decide if should I do commercial resi, or is this a shit commercial or a great commercial opportunity?
Well, clearly experience, surrounding yourself with a load of really good people, starting with small units and sort of building them up, going on training courses and getting on mentorship programs with people who have done it, who have built these things, who have developed buildings, or bought buy-to-let properties, or bought commercial buildings, whatever it is. It's learning from other people that have done it usually.
So 2 final questions for you. One, I've got to give you a compliment. I'm a fan of the Ray Dalio principle: find the smartest people you can, who you disagree with, and have a conversation. And so you and I I agree with a lot of our philosophies are aligned, but one where I was different from you, and you changed my opinion via the podcast, by the way, so indirectly you changed the opinion, was about debt. Let's talk about debt. So I was more from the camp of don't like leverage, don't want the risk.
Pay it all off.
Correct. More debt equals more risk.
Yeah.
So for a long time, I had zero debt of any description because I just went, nope, don't want the risk because I had a train wreck many moons ago and just went, I don't want to do it. And because I found a lot of idiots advising debt where it's like, oh, no money down, and they haven't got a clue what they're doing. But your view on debt, could you speak a few words to it specifically, as it relates to inflation, paying it down, and why it makes sense, but with the caveat of what those sensible levels.
So I and this doesn't apply to businesses. I mean, I don't. We might borrow some money to buy a business, but generally, I will then often pay that down. As quick as I can, really. I'm talking about debt on buildings. So
on fixed assets, hard assets.
Fixed assets that where the value isn't suddenly going to go to zero. Whereas a trading business, they can go like that and then go like that. And we saw that through COVID. So my philosophy with raising debt on buildings is generally I will go up to what the bank will give me, maybe 70, 75%. On a commercial building, maybe 60%. To buy the building, to put as little down as possible. But then once it's up and running, I'll let the debt drift down through just letting Father Time run its course as inflation. And I'm not talking about inflation in the last couple of years, which might have been sort of 10% per annum.
Or the long-term average.
Yeah, maybe the long-term average might be 2 or 3. Over time, that actually sort of brings the loan to value down as pushes the value of the building up. So, I think you let the loan to value drift down to 50%. That's a good sort of risk versus reward balance because, as we know, inflation actually pays debt down. Whilst inflation erodes cash in the bank, it has an inverse relationship on debt. So, at the moment, any debt that we have on our buildings is being paid down by about 10% per year. And people say, well, how do you get that money? If you borrow 100,000 at the end of the year, you haven't paid any of it down, you still owe 100,000. Yeah, you do. But, the value of the building should go to 110,000. Probably won't go to 110,000 between now and a year's time.
Right.
But over the medium to long run, it will come back onto that sort of trend line and the value of the building will keep up, probably exceed the rate of inflation. And the same will happen to the rents. And you're seeing that with the rents at the moment. So,
just obviously inflation, the buying power of money, right?
Yeah.
How much your income is in the future.
Incomes are going up. Of course they're going up. People are sort of moaning because lots of people are only, maybe they're getting 5-6% pay increases when inflation is 10. Absolutely, and that must be really tough. However, in the medium term, I suspect pay increases will exceed the rate of inflation once inflation comes down again, because the employment market is tight, and over time, people's buying power increases. That's how this works. So debt over time devalues. So I think you need some debt there. Because you're not going to get the benefit of inflation eroding that debt over time if you don't have any. And every time inflation goes up, it's your cash that's getting hit rather than money that you borrowed.
Right.
So I think some debt is always good on buildings as long as they're income producing and they're good. If you've just got a piece of land or a building that you can't rent out, of course, the bank's not going to likely give you a mortgage and it's not a good thing, but it enables you, if you take 50% debt, you can buy twice as many buildings and get the growth on twice as many buildings. So why would you not do that?
Well, yeah. I think that the important caveats, of course, the people that are ironically, the people that are slightly concerned or slightly more cautious about using it, it's probably they're the ones that can do it. It's the people that disregard all your caveats or with assuming it's a good building. They just go, borrow as much. I heard Mark say, borrow as much as the bank will lend me.
Yeah.
I don't know if you just saw Skipton Building Society just yesterday came out with a 100% mortgage which doesn't need a guarantor.
Yeah.
So we're back in 100% loan to value territory.
Well, I'm sure there's a load of other stuff behind it in terms of criteria to defend them against default. I don't know what that is. I imagine they'll be credit checking those people more stringently.
They did say good. I mean, the affordability just said affordability, 12 months, like good rent payments and good credit score, but it didn't say more specifically.
I suspect that the people they put through that are not the marginal cases. I suspect they'll increase the criteria on those applicants. They're constantly coming out with stuff like that because they're marketing hooks, aren't they? People see it, it gets to the front. It was on the front page of my BBC News sort of website homepage earlier on, and a few times since the credit crunch, they've talked about 100% mortgages. Oh, we're back there with various products, and you only really see whether it moves the needle or not a couple of years in, and you see how much they've actually lent on these schemes, because a lot of the time it just feels like
it's marketing, isn't it? It's marketing, and there's not much done, and it does feel I don't know about you, and it's very subjective. It does feel like the underwriting still feels significantly more rigorous than it was.
Oh, it's
15
just
years
a
ago.
different universe. I don't think it's in any way similar, and I don't think this will change it either. There's all these FCA rules around, how they have to check affordability, and I suspect there's FCA rules around credit checking. The banks are certainly very bothered about that. They go through your bank statements, work out what you're spending your money on every month, and it's nothing like it was in. I remember getting mortgages in 05, 06, 07. It was just an irrelevance, and the broker
fill in a form, send it off,
and the broker fill most of it in, lie about the income, he'd complete it, and then just send it off. I mean, it's nothing like that now.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So, final question. I want to be respectful of time. So, guilty pleasure. So, ironically, we've spoken about some, I think, important stuff, but I suspect this is the one that gets the most comments. So, you appear, like me, to have a bit of a fascination with air miles, or getting the most for your money. So, I think we should just tend the other side. I recently just bought a round trip first class to Mexico, and it was whatever it was, air miles. So less than $2 grand
British
for
Airways.
2 people. British Airways.
It's about £1,300, £1,400. Yeah.
Yeah.
Plus
and so it was
companion voucher.
Yeah, companion voucher all the way.
180,000. No, it's gone up. Yeah.
I can't remember the
about
number.
About 200,000 miles or something.
I can't remember the number of miles. So I suppose for some people that are missing out on all the goodness, what's the beginner's guide? And again, I think I'll probably point to you've done more than one podcast where you've gone into great depth, way more than I know. But
so just type in, mark my words, Avios, and then a podcast episode will come up, and I discuss that on that. There's also a YouTube video. I think I did an interview with Ian Walmsley. We discuss a load of stuff on there. And the card to get started with really is the British Airways Amex Premium Plus. And then I would also get the Barclays. I'll show you what they look like. I get this Barclays one, which is brilliant. That is a World Elite MasterCard. You get 1.5 Avios for every £1 you spend, which is nice. Mega on MasterCard. And then the other one is the British Airways Premium Plus, and on that you get the companion voucher and also 1.5 Avios for every £1 you spend, which is instead of, I don't know what your first class, it probably would have 15 grand worth of flights, would have thought. Plus.
Something like that,
yeah. Would have been 15, maybe 20 grand, yeah.
So it was pretty special. I'm looking forward to the holiday. So that's it. That's all we've got time for. So, Mark, thank you very much.
Good to see you, Dan.
I hope you enjoyed that episode. 3 things you need to do now. Number 1, make sure you subscribe to this podcast so you do not miss an episode. Also, get on over to Amazon to get a copy of my latest book, Turnover is Vanity, Profit is Sanity, 9.5 steps to improving your profits and cash flow. Also, join our Facebook group, the Turnover is Vanity, Profit is Sanity community, to connect with other business owners.